God hears our small prayers, and God hears our crazy prayers too. Hi, I'm Pastor Brenda. Thanks for joining us again to continuing this honest conversation about prayer. I heard that one about crazy talk from my best friend. I heard it on the day that she found out about her husband's cancer. There was the biopsy, then there was the few days between getting the doctor's report on the biopsy. You see, she's a nurse. So she was able to read the biopsy, and she knew. But she also really didn't know until the doctor said the words. So in those few days, the crazy talk consumed her. You know, life without her husband, life with cancer with her husband, single parenting, what to do with the house. This crazy talk consumed her, and her prayers, she said, were just crazy talk. And she knew that Jesus heard them all. Psalm 22, 1-2 says, my God, why have you abandoned me? Why are you so far away when I groan for help? Every day I call to you, my God, but you do not answer. Every night I lift my voice, but I find no relief. Those prayers of overwhelm are just full of crazy talk, and Jesus hears them all. There's the crazy talk Jesus hears when we say those awful and horrible things to ourselves. You know, the things we would never say to anyone else, but we feel free to say them to ourselves? Yeah, Jesus hears that crazy talk too. Psalm 22, 6-8. For I am a worm and not a man. I am scorned and despised by all. Everyone who sees me mocks me. They sneer and they shake their heads, saying, is this the one who relies on the Lord? Then let the Lord save him. The Lord loves him so much, let the Lord rescue him. Then there is a crazy talk of justifying the hustle that you are continually justifying. You hear me on this one? You're justifying your hustle? You say things to yourself to keep going in this crazy way that you know is crazy? Jesus hears that crazy talk too. Then there's the crazy talk about self-doubt. You know, those overwhelming thoughts you have about making mistakes in your work, your parenting, and your relationships. So let me ask you, do you know anyone who's not made a mistake in their work or their parenting and their relationships? So why do you expect yourself to be above the rest of us and not making any mistakes? Why do you say those things to yourself? Is your expectation of you to be unhuman? This is crazy talk. And Jesus hears this too. Psalm 67:19. But God did listen. He paid attention to my prayer. Jesus hears that 107th rendition of the story that keeps you awake at night, that painful story of betrayal, the one that you can't get out of your head. It keeps you awake at night. You keep telling it to your friends over and over again. It's just repeat for the 107th time. Jesus hears that too, every time. He hears every time you tell this story, and he draws close to you anyway. Psalm 5:1. O Lord, hear me as I pray. Pay attention to my groaning. All right. You feel a little exposed about the crazy talk that goes on inside your head? So let's have a conversation question, right? How are distractions a part of prayer? Talk about that. I'll be right here. Here's another conversation question to have. Is it okay to ask Jesus for multiple things multiple times? To keep pleading and pleading? What do you think about that? Have that conversation. All right. Hopefully your head is spinning full of good thoughts about what prayer really is. Let me give you some Bible here. 1 John 5:14-15. And we are confident that he hears us whenever we ask for anything that pleases him. And since we know he hears us when we make our requests, we also know that he will give us what we ask for. How's that for confidence for when we pray such crazy prayers, or let these crazy prayers or crazy thoughts turn into prayers? Because they do, don't they? Memorize that verse to give you some hope if you get really tangled up with that. Jesus, the one standing before the Father interceding on our behalf, gets to hear all of this crazy talk. Yet he never leaves us, never abandons us, and he never rolls his eyes at us. Psalm 27:10. Even if my father and mother abandon me, the Lord will hold me close. John 14:18. No, I will not abandon you as orphans. I will come to you. Those were Jesus' words to the disciples as he's getting them ready for his death. These are the words he wanted his disciples to know. You are not abandoned. You are not left behind. You're not ignored. And he's not rolling his eyes at you. He is attentive with all those crazy talk thoughts. Prayer changes you no matter what, if it sounds sensible or crazy. Because you know that you know that you know that God is with you. I'm going to read to you a beautiful quote. It comes out of a memoir for Esau McCaulley. He's a African-American theologian. He's a great man. I recommend this book highly. And it's his memoir about growing up in the South in the 1990s and the 2000s, dealing with the sin of systemic racism, which is pretty current. You notice those dates there. This is not in the history. This is recent history. And how he found has prayer shaped him and got him through. Listen to what he learned. Kneeling at my bed at night, I pray that God will help me grow so that I can defend my family. Too small and weak to fight back, I do what my mother has taught me to do. I cry out to God. In the Bible, Esau and Jacob were brothers. Jacob is the chosen one. It is Jacob, not Esau, who wrestles with God during the night, trying to come to grips with his calling and destiny. But within the four walls of our Huntsville home, it is Esau Jr. who tussles with the Almighty. I know many people who have struggled to believe in a God who allows such suffering, especially of innocent children. To them, my childhood pain is evidence that God either doesn't care or isn't powerful enough to help. Religion, they then conclude, is a false promise that keeps people shackled in fear, waiting for a salvation that never arrives. Such criticism becomes more urgent in Black context, where the question of why God didn't intervene and end slavery sooner looms large. Where was God on the slave ship, in the cotton fields, in courtrooms where innocent men and women were condemned to death for crimes they did not commit? Where was God when I was a child in need of his protection? There is no Black faith that doesn't wrestle with the problem of evil. My reply to this question is, we who have suffered must have some say in how suffering is interpreted. We won the right through our scars to discern the significance of what we endured. My grasp of that significance begins with my experiences with God as a child, on my knees in front of my twin bed, hands clasped and eyes shut in tight prayer, repeating the simplest of prayers, help. In those prayers, God came to me, not with logical explanations of the problems of evil, but with his presence. When I prayed, a sensation of warmth that began in my chest moved throughout my body. The room seemed less empty. The lack of speedy deliverance frustrated me and perplexed me, but I never doubted my experiences of God. It is how I survived. God and I have been through hard times together. We have a relationship born out of that intimacy. If there is a testimony that deserves our attention, it is the large number of folks who believe there is no other way to tell the Black story in the United States without affirming that God carried us through. This is the testimony of prayer. This is the testimony of small prayer, contending prayer, and crazy prayers, and how it carries us through. We say often here in our church, as we talk about the sin of systemic racism, that Black history is a history of prayer. That is how how they have handled the great evil that happened. They continue to pray. And when you come to know God like this, you are changed. There is something inside of you that can handle anything that comes your way when you know God this way. Our crazy prayers give us this gift. We often don't make sense, and God hears our prayers anyway, and He answers. I believe that God simply delights in hearing us, and God delights to hear us not make sense, because in that not making sense, we're actually trusting God to do something. My ramblings, my clumsiness are praying the truth of my soul. I encourage you to pray the truth of your soul. Have you ever thought, does praying make my problems worse? Because sometimes when I pray, it's like things do get worse. They don't turn around. God, what are you doing? What's going on? They feel like they get worse. Some things I want you to consider about that. Prayer answers don't happen in sequential order. There's a larger story going on. God has a practice of not asserting His dominion unilaterally, but respects the laws of nature and the choices of His creatures. Some prayers aren't answered because they are just plain stupid. There are 7.7 billion people on earth, which means that at this very moment, millions of prayers are arising simultaneously before God. Experience assures us that many thousands of prayers are contradicting each other. We don't know the end yet. So, keep on praying. Keep on contending. Crazy prayers often come when we are overwhelmed, right? You keep praying that desperate prayer because you don't know what else there is to do but to pray. And because maybe if you pray enough, maybe if you say the right combination of words, maybe if you bargain enough, that God will listen. Because you and I both know you don't know what else to do but pray desperate prayers because we need supernatural help. Like Jesus. Mark 14, 33 through 34 talks about that night when Jesus was betrayed. It says, He took Peter, James, and John with him, and he became deeply troubled and distressed. He told them, My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death. Stay here and keep watch with me. In that overwhelmed state, Jesus wanted to pray, and He wanted His best friends by His side in this darkest hour. He didn't try to put on a brave face. He didn't pretend to be okay. He chose to include them in His distress and even asked them to watch over Him in prayer. Even if they didn't know what to pray for, to just watch over Him in prayer. When we are overwhelmed like that, there's a strong sense to move ourselves into isolation. To think, God has rolled His eyes at us or God has forgotten us. To not trust those around us with what is going on, that we move into isolation. But isolation will keep us out of this kind of honest prayer, praying the truth of our souls. God is okay with us complaining to Him. This is way better than us complaining about God. Do you see the difference? This complaining to God leads to intimacy, understanding, and connection. The very thing that kept Esau McCauley and me grounded for all of our brave lives. It kept us intimate and understanding and connected to this God, listening to all my crazy prayers. God is not afraid of our dissonance with Him or our disappointment, as long as we keep turning our face in His direction. God does not roll His eyes at our crazy prayers. Pete Greig, the founder of 24/7 Prayer, says, pray what you got. If you have gratitude, pray that. Grief, pray that. Anger, pray that. Close quote. It's an open secret that many Christians find prayer boring. One reason for that is because they aren't actually praying. They're performing. Remember praying the truth of your soul? Remember what we talked about praying our small prayers from Matthew 6? Let me just repeat part of that. Be especially careful when you are trying to be good so that you don't make a performance out of it. It might be good theater, but the God who made you won't be applauding. Just play. Just pray. Prayer is not transactional, but relational. And our prayer idea for the week, I'm going to recommend this book to all you parents and grandparents. It's called Upside Down Prayers for Parents by Lisa T. Berggren. Here's the cover. It's got 31 prayers, written prayers, and I'm a big fan of written prayers because sometimes I don't have words to pray and I just need to be reminded of what to pray. So these are 31 things to pray for that as a parent you probably don't want to pray for. Like you're praying for your child to persevere through a hard time to learn what perseverance is. Or you're praying for your child to learn that evil does exist in this world. Like, you don't want to pray that stuff. So there are 31 devotionals in here. They're meh. But the prayers here, write those down and start praying those over your children or your grandchildren in my case. Sometimes they feel like crazy prayers too. So, I want to leave you with hope. When you know that God answers your crazy prayers, you will make it through. And when something happens again, because I'm afraid we're not exempt from pain, you'll make it again. You'll find out how faithful God really is. And that is a gift that gives you this brave faith, which is why I say the brave pray. The brave pray crazy prayers, and they know God. Amen.